Find out what is happening at the library, from virtual programming to fun new services. Hear recommendations on books, movies, TV shows, and so much more. This is In the Stacks at Mustang Library. Hello, my name is Jenny here at Mustang Library, and I wanted to talk to you about Audiobook Month, which is celebrated every June. Founded and promoted by the Audio Publishers Association, Audiobook Month is a way to celebrate reading books through audiobooks. It's a perfect way to kick off our summer reading program, which started this month. And yes, listening to audiobooks counts towards your reading minutes. Personally, I love listening to audiobooks when I cook or when I clean around the house or when I drive on my commute to work. If you haven't listened to audiobooks before, I definitely recommend you give them a try. We have a ton in our catalog at scottsdalelibrary.org, from CD audiobooks to digital audiobooks that you can listen to through Overdrive on your phone, tablet, or computer. To celebrate that June is Audiobook Month, I wanted to share some recommendations of my favorite audiobooks in different categories. So the first category is memoirs, and personally I think that memoirs are the best books to read on audio, because you're able to listen to the author tell their own story in their own words, and that just makes it so much more impactful and personal. So I have a few recommendations that I'm going to share with you. The first is a recent publication called Crying in H Mart by Michelle Zauner, published by Knopf Publishing Group, and the audiobook was produced by Random House Audio. From the indie rock star of Japanese breakfast fame and author of the viral 2018 New Yorker essay that shares the title of this book, an unflinching, powerful memoir about growing up Korean American, losing her mother, and forging her own identity. The next audiobook that I'm going to recommend is Know My Name by Chanel Miller. Published by Viking, audiobook produced by Penguin Audio. She was known to the world as Emily Doe when she stunned millions with a letter. Brock Turner had been sentenced to just 6 months in county jail after he was found sexually assaulting her on Stanford's campus. Her victim impact statement was posted on BuzzFeed, where it instantly went viral, viewed by 11 million people within 4 days. Now she reclaims her identity to tell her story of trauma, transcendence, and the power of words. Know My Name will forever transform the way we think about sexual assault, challenging our beliefs about what is acceptable, and speaking truth to the tumultuous reality of healing. It also introduces readers to an extraordinary writer, one whose words have already changed our world. Entwining pain, resilience, and humor, this memoir will stand as a modern classic. The second audiobook category that I want to talk about is production. So a lot of audiobooks typically have a single narrator, but there are plenty others that have full production, music, sound effects, as well as a whole cast of voice actors. So the first title that I'm going to recommend, it came out last year. It is a sci-fi title called The City We Became by N.K. Jemisin. It was published by Orbit Books, and the audiobook was produced by Orbit Books. 5 New Yorkers must come together in order to defend their city. Every city has a soul. Some are as ancient as myths, and others are as new and destructive as children. New York City, she's got 5. But every city also has a dark side. A roiling ancient evil stirs beneath the earth, threatening to destroy the city and her 5 protectors, unless they can come together and stop it once and for all. The second book that I'm going to recommend is a young adult novel that came out a couple years ago by one of my favorite young adult authors. It is called Sadie by Courtney Summers, published by Wednesday Books, and the audiobook was produced by Macmillan Audio. A missing girl on a journey of revenge. A serial-like podcast following the clues she's left behind, and an ending you won't be able to stop talking about. Courtney Summers has written the breakout book of her career. Sadie is propulsive and harrowing and will keep you riveted until the last page. The audiobook actually won an award. They won the Odyssey Award for Excellence in Audiobook Production. The final category is poetry. And personally, I think poetry is meant to be heard. So, some modern and recent publications that I've really enjoyed are The Hill We Climb by Amanda Gorman, published by Viking Books, audiobook produced by Penguin Random House Audio. Black Girl Call Home by Jasmine Mans, published by Berkeley, audiobook produced by Penguin Audio. Swimming Lessons by Lily Reinhardt, published by St. Martin's Griffin, audiobook produced by Macmillan Audio. These poetry audiobooks can be found on Overdrive as electronic audiobooks, and all of the titles mentioned can be found in our catalog at scottsdalelibrary.org. Thank you for letting me talk about some of my favorite audiobook recommendations to celebrate Audiobook Month. Now let's hear what other Scottsdale Public Library staff have to say about their favorite audiobooks.
Hi, my name's Sarah and I'm a library assistant here at Mustang Library.
And my name's Jess. I'm also a library assistant here at Mustang.
And we want to talk to you today about audiobooks.
Mm-hmm.
So first off is the Audio Awards. I didn't know this was a thing, but back in March 22nd, there was a virtual event called the Audio Awards, which was hosted by John Leguizamo, which, I always remember him as the guy from Romeo and Juliet. There were some celebrity judges such as Melissa De La Cruz, Tommy Orange, V.E. Schwab, and David Sedaris. Sounds like a pretty good show.
A stellar lineup. Yeah.
So even though the event is over, you can watch the entire award ceremony on YouTube.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
It's sort of like the audio Oscars or something.
Yes, it's like the Oscars of audiobooks.
Yeah, okay.
And then on their website, you can read about how to submit, who the judges were, and the history of the Audio Awards. And that website is audiopub.org. So First off is Audiobook of the Year, which was the biggest category. And that winner, any guesses?
There are so many. There are so many.
So the winner of Audiobook of the Year was PIRANESI by Susanna Clark. Have you read it?
Okay, I have not.
I have not either, but after hearing about it, I'm very intrigued. So I've looked up this summary of this story, and a lot of people are saying that they can't talk about it much because it'll give the story away. So anything they say is going to give it away.
Yeah.
So that's kind of mysterious and intriguing for me.
Okay.
I think I want to read it.
Okay.
Or listen to it on an audiobook.
Yeah.
So for autobiography and memoir, and also best male narrator, was the autobiography of Malcolm X, as told to Alex Haley. And guess who the narrator was? Lawrence Fishburne.
Whoa!
From The Matrix, right?
Whoa. So he's an actor.
Yes.
So a lot of actors seem to be narrators as well.
And that's a big thing this year, it seems, is a lot of people who are in television and movies and in music are doing some amazing things with audiobooks this year. We have a few more. So another one that is an actor turned audiobook extraordinaire for the humor category was A Very Punchable Face by Colin Jost.
Crikey.
Great title, right?
Face. Yeah. Wow.
Comedy, it's a humor or the humor category. He's the guy who does the weekend update on SNL.
Oh. Okay.
Another one that was kind of a surprise to me for best original work was When You Finish Saving the World by Jesse Eisenberg. And I don't know if you remember Jesse Eisenberg, but he was the guy in Zombieland and the Mark Zuckerberg movie.
Okay.
So he's been in quite a few things.
Yeah.
So he won for Best Original Work, his audiobook. Another one that I think you might be interested in is the category for Best Narration by the Author was Alicia Keys' More Myself.
A musician narrating her own book. Fantastic.
Yeah. I love when the author narrates the story.
Yeah.
Seems more authentic. And then another one that really stood out to me for audio drama, which is another interesting category because this is when you have a full cast narrating a story.
Oh, so it's not just one narrator. You have a bunch of people.
So if you have males and females, you can have male and female narrators to do the voices. So the winner of that one was for Doctor Who.
Ooh.
Stranded 1 was the title, and that was by Big Finish Productions. And some of the performers on there were people like Tom Baker.
Yes.
Doctor Who's.
Yes, he was.
Yeah.
Somebody I recognize. Somebody in my age group. Okay.
So yeah, and then some of the other categories were science fiction, business personal development, history biography, romance, mystery, nonfiction, and you can find all of those on their website, all the winners.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
Fantastic. I think also what we really wanted to talk about was why we love audiobooks. We love audiobooks for different reasons.
This is true.
For instance, I used to be a proofreader on a daily newspaper.
Mm-hmm.
And, I can read pretty fast if I'm just flipping through a book for information, a nonfiction book, I want to find out about something. Fine. But if I'm reading a novel, I feel absolutely compelled to start verse 1, chapter 1, page 1. I start reading the sentence, I go, that comma shouldn't be there.
Editor mode kicks in.
Mode. Oh, proofreader. It's painful. It's painfully slow. So when I discovered audiobooks, I went, that's great. I don't have to slow myself down like that. And I was then thrilled to discover the wonderful narrators. A good narrator is really like a good actor. Well,
Yes.
is a good actor, in fact. I mean, if you notice the narrator getting in the way of the book, obviously they're not doing a good job. But when they enhance the book for you,
Yes.
heaven.
Mm-hmm.
What about you? Why do you like audiobooks?
Also, like the full cast, like we were talking about, one of the best audiobooks that I read in the last year was Daisy Jones and the Six, because it's set up like an interview of a band from around the 70s, which had a lot of like Fleetwood Mac vibes to me. But it's set up like the whole band is being interviewed, and it's a full cast, and there's a different actor for each voice. And it made it so much fun to listen to. It's one of my favorite audiobooks because it was just so entertaining. It was like just listening to a play or a movie or something.
Yeah, like an old-fashioned radio drama.
Right.
Something in those days.
Yes.
People would gather around the radio and listen to the
Right, yeah.
sound effects, crinkling paper, steps on the pathway.
And some of them did have, the sound effects as well. Yeah.
Well, so that's a whole different thing. I tend to listen to audiobooks that just have one narrator. And some of the most wonderful narrators, I mean, the best narrators know how to distinguish between characters. They have worked up different voices, not necessarily different accents, although some narrators are fabulous at doing different accents.
Mm-hmm.
But too much of that also gets in the way.
Right.
And you're focused on all these different accents. But if you can distinguish the different voices of the different characters, that I love it, And we were talking to a colleague of ours as well. She was talking about how sometimes a narrator can make the book more interesting than just reading it yourself.
Yeah. One of that always comes to mind for me was You by Carolyn Kepnes. A lot of people have watched the show on Netflix, but the audiobooks tend to get me because the main character, Joe, is meant to be creepy. And he's creepy in the show, but when you listen to the audiobooks, he's so much creepier.
Oh, yeah.
Much creepier. And I listened to the audiobooks first before I watched the show, and it just changed it for me. Like, it was intense.
Yeah.
So the narrator definitely can make or break it.
Exactly. I mean, I tend to read books in a series, and it's wonderful if you really like the narrator and then you recognize the same voice for that character every time you read a new book in the series. And it can be quite disruptive when suddenly there's a new voice. I tend to read a lot of mysteries, either light-hearted, cozy mysteries, or sometimes slightly more intense. But I was listening to a fairly light-hearted mystery about this young woman who owns a bookshop and she solves crimes or whatever. So the original narrator started off the first few books, and I had in my mind this character in her kind of mid-20s, probably young woman. Well, next thing I know, I listened to book number whatever it was. There's a new voice, but this woman had an older voice. I mean, this woman was maybe more in her late 30s, 40s. That was the sound of her voice, and I went, that's not that character. That's not that same character, Right. And also, I remember listening to a whole series of detective novels that I really was enjoying, and then a new narrator all of a sudden starts, and, well, it was awful, I have to say. I'm not naming any names, and, maybe I just didn't relate to that narrator, but I was sort of gripping the edge of the chair, trying to get through the book, thinking, I just can't bear it anymore. I had to stop. I stopped, I don't know, quarter of the way through. So,
and that brings up a good point about one of the things that I love is being able to switch back and forth between the physical book and the audiobook. A lot of times I will start reading a book, and if I'm really into it and it's one that I don't want to put down, but I have to, do work in life, I'll also get the audiobook so I can pick up where I left off, say like on my commute to work. Or if I have to do the dishes or do some cleaning around the house, then I'll just put my headphones in and pick up where I left off. So that's one thing that I really enjoy about audiobooks, is having that ability to go back and forth.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Well, I don't go back and forth, obviously. And I do pay more attention. I don't usually multitask. I'm listening to it. Well, I multitask perhaps in the sense that I'm eating my lunch whilst also listening. That's as far as it goes. But I'll listen to an audiobook in the evening or before going to sleep or whatever. And I did want to recommend some books that I really, really have enjoyed. There are a number of series. Is that a word? Series.
A lot of series.
A lot of books in a series.
There we go.
Okay, one of those is the Maisie Dobbs series, and the author is Jacqueline Winspear, and the narrator is Orla Cassidy. She's lovely. Maisie Dobbs starts off as a young servant girl in a house slightly before the First World War, and it carries on. The series has gone out for 20-something books already, I think. Anyway, it goes through the First World War and into the Second World War, and she eventually becomes a different kind of detective, a lovely detective. Then there's also the Inspector Ian Rutledge mystery series by Charles Todd, and that's narrated by Simon Preble. And Simon Preble's a fabulous narrator. He's done a lot of books. And also Charles Todd has also written the Bess Crawford series, and that one's narrated by Rosalind Landor. I tend to relate to a lot of British. A lot of these are happening during the First World War, and I don't know why. I'm just sort of fascinated by that period and the period between the wars. And finally, on a completely different note, very popular author Alexander McCall Smith.
Yes.
He's fabulous. But the series I particularly like is the Number One Ladies Detective Agency. Takes place in Botswana. And that one's narrated by Lisette Licart. But finally, I wanted to particularly tell you about a wonderful series, the Flavia de Luce series by Alan Bradley. Alan Bradley is a Canadian author, but in fact, Flavia de Luce series is based in Britain in the 1950s. It's a cozy mystery series, but incredibly quirky. And one person I was reading about online, he has a piece called The Field Guide to the Flavia de Luce Mystery Series. His name is Don Mulcair, who wrote this. He compares it to the series, something between Downton Abbey and the Addams Family.
That right there has me sold.
Yeah, with a touch of arsenic and old lace added for flavor. And that is the perfect description, I think. The main character, let me read you a little bit of the from the description from Overdrive of the first novel in the Flavia de Luce series. The first novel is called The Sweetness at the Bottom of the Pie. And in this wickedly brilliant first novel, it introduces one of the most singular and engaging heroines in recent fiction, 11-year-old Flavia de Luce, an aspiring chemist with a passion for poison.
Is this some Wednesday Addams vibes? Is that what you have happening?
Kind of. It's the summer of 1950, and the series of inexplicable events has struck Buckshaw, the decaying English mansion that Flavia's family calls home. A dead bird is found on the doorstep, a postage stamp bizarrely pinned to its beak. Hours later, Flavia finds a man lying in the cucumber patch and watches him as he takes his dying breath. Anyway, carries on from there. But it's very, very quirky. Now, you're thinking, okay, an 11-year-old heroine. Really? Is this an adult book? I'm telling you, it's for all ages, young adult and adults. So the series continues with Flavia solving various mysteries, mysterious murders. The narrator here is Jane Entwistle, and she does a fabulous job. I mean, she perfectly captures the character of Flavia. Flavia's brilliant, she's mischievous, she's bold, she's tenacious, and she's also touchingly tender and caring towards another of the main characters, Dogger. Dogger is a former British prisoner of war who tends the cucumbers, is a general handyman about the place, and he kind of takes care of Flavia's widowed father and Flavia herself. So anyway, just very quirky series. Jane Entwistle is the narrator. She's fabulous.
I'm always looking for new audiobook recommendations, too.
Yeah.
There's nothing that I dislike more than starting a new audiobook and just not connecting with the narrator. So that's one thing that's great about, like, Overdrive, is that you can kind of trial some before you commit.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And the other thing on Overdrive is that, which I've often done, once I find a narrator that I really like, I will search for books by the narrator and will try new books, even if I'm unfamiliar with the author, I'm not quite sure what it's about. I'm thinking, well, that person reads it, so let me give it a go. Okay, well, this has been a lot of fun. Thank you so much for joining us, talking about audiobooks.
Yep, thank you.